Now, nothing is ever easy, is it? I just blew up the tyres on the tractor because I wanted to shift it out of here and they're a bit soft, and only to find that the two rear valves, tyre valves, had fallen apart, so I couldn't get air in or out, and then when I tried to extract them they just fell apart. So I managed to kind of get one to pop all the way in, so it'll wander around inside the tyre, but that's no big deal. The second one, however, was kind of jammed and I couldn't budge it. I drove an easy out in and it pulled out a chunk of it, but in the end I had to get a drill and then drill it, and that actually demolished the rest of it, and then the air started to blast out so I could then put in new valves. But you know, a 10 or 15 minute job to inflate the tyres ends up being an hour and a half. Anyway, we've got to do an oil change, or a service actually, on this car. So let's do, first of all, take that cover off, but we could probably just do the simple bits first, so the easy bits first, leaving the last bit to the end. However, air filter, and that should be simple enough. That's in there. We'll probably just pull the whole thing off. Fuel filter, which you can see over there, and then oil filter and oil change. So what we might do first up though is clamber underneath and let's get that oil starting to drain. The engine cover comes off. There's just two 10mm bolts. I'll show you that. Here and here. And then you've got to give it a sharp lift up because it sort of sits on two bolts like that, which are an interference fit. The drain plug's been loosened. Now it's a 14mm bolt or plug, and I've pulled that out and it's draining into a bucket. Unfortunately the bucket's a bit small because the normal drain tank I use, this one here, was too tall to fit underneath, unfortunately, and so I've cut down a bucket, but it's reached the brim, so we might have to just leave it there and then back the car off it and then empty it out. Probably messily, but I've this cardboard underneath there as well as a rag, so that should soak up any spills. Now we've got to get the filter off, and here's the fuel filter. So there's an O-ring in there as well, so we'll remember that. But this this seems to be exactly the same as that one there. And there's what looks like a sensor which goes on the bottom, so that probably has to come off that old one. But that looks as though we've got exactly the right one. So let's take some of these hoses off and get them out of the way. We're going to call it quits for today. Remember I said about the tractor tyres and nothing's easy? Well, this is the same. We've got the fuel filter off and changed. We haven't put it back on because the oil filter is directly underneath it. And no matter how hard we tried, and I'll show you something. I got one of these oil filter tools, I think I showed you, to try and get that oil filter off. But first of all, it's a 3/8 drive, and I've only got 1/2 inch drive, but it does have an adapter. But you put the adapter in like so, and then as you drop it in, it just falls right off the bottom. And then the little ball bearing that's supposed to locate it sprang right out completely. So I've got a ball bearing and a spring, but no way of keeping this on. So it just falls right off. So when you try and poke it down, it falls off. So this isn't proving to be much use. So I think we're going to have to find a different way of getting to it, and I think there is another way, and that involves taking off the wheel, taking off some of the inner wheel trim, and then reaching in from the side to get it, which is pretty bloody stupid, seeing as I went to the trouble of getting one of these, but I actually just can't use it because of that stupid cheap construction. Anyway, we've got the fuel filter done. We've got, well, it needs to be replumbed, you know, but it's been changed. It's just sitting there. We've done the air filter. We've drained the oil, and we've just got to do the oil filter. Then we can top her up. So tomorrow we'll pull the wheel off. Exactly like the tractor tyres, everything turned out to be very much tougher than anticipated, and it's only an oil change, for goodness sake. It shouldn't be that hard. But I told you about this, and in the end the only way I could actually get around it was to wrap some duct tape. Can you see that? That duct tape around that shaft there, which is the 1/2 inch to 3/8 adapter, and hammer it in so that it actually stuck on there. I couldn't tape the whole thing on because of course that needs to turn, but that did the trick. We got the filter off. Getting the new filter on wasn't so easy because they're actually a different size. I don't mean that the thread size was different or the mating face, you know, where the rubber ring is, but the filter was fatter, and so it was a tight enough squeeze to get that thin one out, but even more difficult to get the fat one in. But anyway, we did it, and then when we put the fuel filter back together again, we had a leak out of the bottom where the sensor is, so we had to strip that back off again and refit the sensor, because we'd fitted the new O-ring with it, and that seems to have solved it. Now we've primed it. We filled it with about 5 litres or so of oil, and it takes about 6 or 7, but it's showing, you know, like halfway on the dipstick. So we'll top that up once we've tried it, but let's start her up and then see if she runs, and then we'll also then check for leaks for both fuel and oil. And we did I think I mentioned to you, we did the air filter the other day. So let's start it up. She's surging a bit, and I'm guessing that's because wait until it's, I mean, we did prime it, but you know, we just don't know how much air might still be in the lines until the fuel pump starts up and fills it. Let's have a look for leaks. First of all, there's nothing around the fuel filter. And nothing underneath, so let's check the oil level. There's only one thing left to do, and that is to reset the... As I understand it, what you have to do is to turn the key on and hold down the odometer trip meter at the same time, and it resets, as you'll see here, 10,000 for the spanner. Job done.